Hello everybody and welcome to today's video analysing the character of Keith in Michael Frayn's novel Spies. Almost immediately, the reader is made aware that Keith is not a very nice person. He is manipulative, controlling and a liar. While Stephen seems to believe that Keith has seen a kind of talking monkey, page 18, the reader knows this cannot be true. As a reader, we do not trust Keith, yet young Stephen does. Frayn's use of structure is key here. In undermining the character of Keith so early in the novel, the reader is in no doubt that he cannot be trusted and that Stephen's respect for him is misplaced. It may take Stephen the entire novel to outgrow his friend, but the reader sees immediately how Stephen is far superior to Keith, and this makes the novel all the more satisfying as Stephen slowly recognises the true nature of Keith's character. Keith attends the right local preparatory school, page 16, as opposed to Stephen, who attends the wrong school, page 16. Frayn's use of the opposing adjectives right and wrong here indicates the fact that Stephen views Keith as being superior to him. Again, the reader is unlikely to share Stephen's view that the school one attends is either right or wrong. Keith is described as being very tidy. All Keith's toys are his own, neatly arranged in drawers and cupboards, often in the boxes they came in, page 17. This meticulous attention to order presents Keith as a mirror image of his father. Consider the description of Mr. Hayward's garage. The wheels themselves were hung neatly on the wall, alongside a picnic hamper, tennis rackets in wooden presses, deflated airbeds and rubber rings, page 21. Frayn draws this early parallel between Keith and his father to foreshadow later, more troubling similarities between the two. In Chapter 3, Frayn uses language to present the relationship between Keith and Stephen. When investigating Mrs. Hayward's diary, Stephen pleads, "But if it's something private," page 49. Keith's response is blunt and demanding, "Put it in the logbook." Frayn's use of the imperative verb put symbolises the nature of the boys' friendship. Keith is clearly the boss. He tells Stephen what to do, with no room for debate or discussion. As the novel progresses, Keith becomes more and more like his father. In Chapter 4, Keith begins to mirror Mr. Hayward, telling Stephen to go home if you're bored, old bean, page 68. The use of old bean is an early sign of the emerging sadistic side to Keith, who is beginning to echo the words of his father. The difference between the two is exaggerated when Keith's adult-like behaviour is juxtaposed with Stephen's childish pondering over the notion that aunts don't live in the same street as you, page 69. However, despite his childish behaviour, we see that Stephen is often guessing correctly about what he is observing. He wonders what secrets do they have now that they're grown up, secrets about Uncle Peter, perhaps, page 70. As the reader will later discover, Stephen is correct here. Despite his subservience to Keith, his ignorance of adult life and his dislike of the opposite sex, Stephen is still managing to work his way towards the solution to the mystery. This greatly contrasts with Keith's implausible notions. When the boys discover that Mrs. Hayward disappears at the end of the road, Stephen guesses that she's gone into one of these houses in the avenue, page 73. He is ignored by Keith, who has his own theory that his mother has gone down a manhole. What's taking place here is known as structural juxtaposition, the deliberate placing together of two very opposite things, in this case ideas, used to exaggerate the difference between the two. Although both boys are ultimately incorrect, it's clear to the reader that Stephen is thinking logically, whereas Keith is thinking irrationally. Once again, Frayn forces the reader to make their own judgments outside of the narrator's tale. Stephen may feel that Keith's theory is more probable, page 73, but the reader knows it is not. Finally, Stephen's relationship with Keith changes throughout the story. Initially, Keith dominates and controls Stephen. Stephen sees himself as the loyal squire and sword-bearer that a hero requires, page 53. This metaphor indicates the nature of the relationship. Keith is superior in every way, despite the fact that Stephen is often humiliated by him, page 48. By the end of the novel, we learn that Keith went on to work as a barrister of some sort, page 232. Frayn's use of the vague phrase "some sort" indicates Stefan's lack of interest. He isn't interested in Keith's future because he outgrew his need for and dependence on his childhood friend. I hope you found this video useful. Please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.